Hey there, Suzi here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share this special message with you. Now, my co-host Michelle and I love masterminds. Not only do we belong to masterminds, but we also host a mastermind. We started it almost 8 years ago, and it is the premier mastermind for women business owners who want to grow their business with a specific focus on marketing. Now, this group is usually completely booked out, and very occasionally we open the doors and invite a handful of women in. So if you're growing your business, but you're struggling with feeling overwhelmed, or like you constantly have a split focus when it comes to your marketing, this could be exactly what you're looking for. We have an amazing time together, and the women in the group are extraordinary. They're great cheerleaders, supporters, advisors, and colleagues for you. And they're also seeing extraordinary results. We see people cracking the $1 million, $2 million, $3 million mark, launching new e-commerce sites that go from $0 to $10,000 a month in sales. They're doubling their conversion rates, they're growing memberships, they're selling courses, they're growing their personal brands, and they're getting all kinds of media exposure and speaking opportunities and so much more. You can learn more about the mastermind and join the wait list over at herbusinessmastermind.com. We're going to open the doors soon, so you definitely want to be on the list to get an invitation. So head on over to herbusinessmastermind.com. Create content that attracts, converts, and keeps your ideal clients. This is Content Sells. Hi, you're listening to the Content Sells podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 176. I'm Suzi Dafnis, and here with me is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. How are you, Michelle?
I am great, Suzi. I'm going through my to-do list and checking off some very big items, and it feels very good.
Congratulations. What a good start to the year. Get those things checked off. Very, very good. I am, as this episode comes out, I am hopefully, my fingers are crossed, all my bits are crossed. I am hopefully overseas. On a break, attending my mastermind, which I'm a part of. You know, we're a big fan of masterminds, Michelle and I. We talk about them often here, and we have our own mastermind. But hopefully, as you are listening to this, I am in the US at my mastermind and, getting creative ideas and connecting with incredible other marketers.
Do you remember how to get on a plane? Like not sure. I used to do it like a bus. Now I'm not sure.
I don't know if I know how to pack. I have to pull up those packing lists and I don't know, I'm going to have to see do I need a new luggage or do I have the right shoes? I don't know, all the important things. And, how do I not overpack because I'm only going to be away for 12 days or whatever it is. So we shall see. But one of the things that will be consistent and has been for the past 20 something years that'll happen while I'm away is that our newsletter will go out. And it's amazing to think about it, but we've been publishing a weekly online newsletter for more than 2 decades. And before that, a paper newsletter. Well, since 1994, I've published newsletters, but the one, I don't think we've ever missed a week. And the only times that we don't publish are when we're closed over the holidays. And
that just in and of itself is pretty damn extraordinary.
It is. It's probably the most consistent content because this show is called Content Sells. The most consistent content I have is my newsletter. I hadn't really thought about that. And you've done your own newsletters and you've helped clients, of course, and students with theirs. So I'm really excited that today we're going to be talking about some of the biggest mistakes we see. And if you're a member of the Her Business Network and I happen to get your newsletter, do not be surprised if I write back to you if I see one of these mistakes, because I do it all the time. So that's what we're hoping is that perhaps as the result of today, we're going to be taking you through 7 mistakes we see that you're going to go, oh, I'm doing that. And you might be able to make a small change that might make a big difference to your results.
Yeah, because here's the thing. When it comes to, email newsletters, I think firstly, we do need to address the elephant in the room, and that is, do I even need an email newsletter or do I need some kind of newsletter? Because they don't always even have to be email-based. And my answer is it depends. And I know many successful businesses that don't do a regular newsletter, and I know many that do. And we've got Suzi here who is maybe going to win the gold medal for the most consistent newsletter in Australia or the world. Doing it very successfully. And so I just wanted to point out, as with all our content strategies, there needs to be a very clear purpose and strategic reason why we do what we do. The whole kind of ethos, this philosophy of no content without conversion. And the sad thing is that many newsletters I see, and Suzi, I know we've talked about this, are pure filler. People are just going through the motions because somewhere along the line, they decided they had to put out a newsletter each week or every other week or every month or whatever interval they had decided. And they've just got into this rote process of just churn and burn this content out the door. So as we get into these mistakes, I just want to be clear that you don't have to have a newsletter. But if you do, these mistakes are definitely going to help you. And if you don't have a newsletter, well, this might inspire you to start one. Or you can absolutely apply these comments to other parts of your marketing, like your emails in general, or other regular communications that you might be creating, like a podcast, or you might do regular Facebook Lives or other content that you're putting out there. You will find some great tips in here as well.
Absolutely. And if, as Michelle said, we've had a newsletter for a long, long time. And the main reason that we have a newsletter is because it is a way for us to stay in communication with and add value to our Her Business Network members every single week. And that is the primary reason. And while we've had at different times newsletters for non-members, and I will talk about that later in today's episode, that one way that members can depend on us to show up in their inbox every single Thursday at around 11 a.m. Sydney time, that's consistency. That builds trust, dependability. They know what to look for. So let's have a look at these 7 mistakes. And I want to kick off with the first one, Michelle, which is using the newsletter as the primary place to sell whatever it is you're offering. Now, here's why this is a mistake, because when we send a newsletter, it typically has more than one focus. A lot of newsletters are a little bit like a magazine where you have multiple different sections and you might have a header and a, in this issue, table of contents, and you might do a lot of different things. And using a newsletter to try and sell something that is important to your bottom line, that is your primary income earner, it's not the same. We would always and do always send dedicated emails for things we actually want to sell. And the newsletter becomes like a bit of a backstop. It can be an announcement or it can be a supplementary thing, because there's always a lot going on in most newsletters. Now, some newsletters are a little different, and we'll talk about that as well. But when I get most newsletters, it is this smorgasbord. And so there's multiple actions I can take. I can go through a blog post, I can download a lead magnet, I can contact the author, I can do a poll or a survey. And Michelle, you say this saying, and I don't know whose saying it is, but it's that a confused mind says no. And so what we can do when we have those sorts of newsletters and we're really trying to sell X, but we're giving people, A to Z in the newsletter, is that they will not do the thing that we want them to do, which might be to buy. And so we don't want it to be a catch-all for everything we want to do. It can't be our only marketing piece if we want to really sell our products and services.
Yeah. And I don't know how many times I've said to people, what do you do? How do you, market to your list? And they say, we have a monthly newsletter. And I think, okay, well, that's doing, 4/5 of 5/8 of nothing in terms of carrying the heavy load of getting people to buy your stuff. And it really gets back to why you're doing a newsletter. And so the flip side, I guess, of this mistake is having a really clear purpose about what the newsletter is for. So, for example, I've got a client who sends a lot of dedicated emails. So Suzi used that phrase, dedicated email. That means, one email sent out with one very specific purpose, with one call to action, and often part of a series of single dedicated emails that forms a sequence that might be to promote a new course or to promote opening the doors on membership, or that you've got a special offer coming up. And this client does a lot of that. And so their weekly newsletter, they view as a way to kind of give back at least once a week to their audience with just value add content, where they're not asking them to buy anything. They're not asking them to do any heavy lifting. They just want to add value. So it's really about getting clear about why you're doing a newsletter. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have offers in your newsletter. And Suzi, you made a great point. It can often be a backstop, for example. So you've already launched, you may as well mention it in your newsletter. If you've got a campaign that's running from the 10th of the month till the 20th of the month, and you've got a newsletter going out on the 13th and the 20th, you would absolutely feature that promotion in the newsletter. But you don't want to be under the illusion that it's all you need. It's going to do the heavy lifting of the selling, because generally it won't. For that very reason, that there's so many things in the newsletter. My mind is thinking, oh, I'll click on that or I'll click on that. It's already difficult enough getting people to click on an email when it's a dedicated email and you only have them focusing on one thing. So I really feel it's much better to use the newsletter to create rapport, that connection, that trustworthiness that Suzi was talking about, and then to do a couple of really important things that support the sale with your newsletter. The first is to seed the sale. And we've got a whole episode on seeding and what that actually means. But basically, before something's coming, or even while it's open, you just kind of mention, oh, and by the way, we're covering that here. I'm seeding this other episode with you right now. And so you just do things that kind of seed what's about to happen. You might share some behind the scenes content or a sneak peek of something, and people are thinking, ooh, there's something coming. And you can build up connection and anticipation ahead of the launch or ahead of whatever's about to happen. And it is really great for sharing behind the scenes content, customer stories, all those things that do help to build up that connection and that anticipation.
Thanks, Michelle. And that leads really well into mistake number 2, which is trying to do too many things with your newsletter versus being single-minded. And we've kind of touched on this already, but really knowing what is the newsletter designed to do. And I mentioned earlier that our newsletter is really there to demonstrate the value of being part of our community. We always show the beautiful faces of other members. We provide free advertising space. So if you're a member of the Her Business Network, you can advertise your offers and your business every single week, and we put those ads inside of our newsletter. And so it's a free vehicle for them to get more exposure about their business. And it's a connection point. It's, a message from Suzi. It's what's happening in the network. It's what members are offering other specials. And it's a format that it becomes very predictable. But the one thing is, hey, I'm part of this incredible community. Look at all these women. And here am I in this newsletter. And it's, quick bites of what is coming up. So that might sound like a lot of things, but it's really one purpose, is to remind people that they're part of this incredible community, and here's all the things that are available to them to tap into inside of the community, especially these other women. So we always have tons and tons of images of other women, and we're sharing the wins that they're having and what they're doing in their business and their promotions. So it's a really, really great vehicle that demonstrates community.
One of the things I'm taking from what you're saying there, Suzi, is even though you've got a few different things that you feature in the newsletter that you just sort of took us through, it's for your members. It's not for your members, your non-members, people who don't know you. You're not trying to do 50 different things to 50 different audiences. You're always about, this is the membership. Here's how you can use the membership. Here's why you want to stay in the membership. Here's all the other members. And so I'm really seeing that as the single-minded nature that you're talking about there.
Exactly.
And, contrary to popular belief, a newsletter is not about news. It doesn't have to be 50 million different things. So it's not reporting necessarily on the team member of the month or, the things that are happening inside your organization that you are just broadcasting out to your audience. Unless, of course, the purpose of your newsletter is like an internal newsletter aimed at supporting team morale, which would be that single-minded purpose, then you might want to include team member of the month. But I can't tell you, even now, how many newsletters I see that are just blurting out irrelevant news from within their organization to their exterior customers. In most cases, a newsletter is your chance for that regular contact with your ideal customers where you're adding value to them. You're sending this out every week or every other week or every month or whatever your interval is. You have to work every single time you put that issue out to add value, because they're just going to stop opening it. They're going to unsubscribe. So don't make it about you. It's not, you can share customer stories, you can do some of those things, but you want to understand what is it that your customer or your audience is going to value opening time and time again. So it's not just about information, and it's not just about broadcasting your own news. It is really about being strategic about what is going to get your email opened, what is going to continue to get that email opened or that video watched or whatever it might be. And one of the real keys there is, and this is why this point about being single-minded really works, is what will people know your newsletter for? So Suzi's said, my newsletter, my members know it's for them and it's for understanding how to use the membership and what's going on in the membership. I was thinking before this recording, Suzi, about, well, what are the newsletters that I just never open? I haven't unsubscribed. I just delete them or skip over them. And what are the newsletters that I do open? And I think I've mentioned this one on the show before. There's a newsletter by a guy called Dave Pell called Next Draft. And it's really a witty take on all kinds of stuff that's happening on the internet. He seems to find all the corners of the internet and posts really interesting articles all in one place. So he's curating information for me that I don't have to go and find, which is the value for me. His tagline is managing editor, the internet. So that's kind of how he sees it. And so I just want to keep opening that because I'm getting what I want from there. I don't have time to look at all the 50 million places out there. And he's doing all of that and putting it in this one witty newsletter for me. So that's one I open. Another one is run by my cousin, Joanne. Hi, Jo. And she has a business called Shop Naturally, where she's kind of affected by a lot of allergies and things. And she started this business sourcing allergy-free things. And her newsletter is always all the specials and what's back in stock. And so her audience knows that if they want to buy from her, they want to check out this week's specials. Victoria LaBalme, somebody we've had on the show before, does a regular rabbits on the first of the month. Now, for her, it's not really about any kind of news. There's no specials in it. There's no searching the internet. Her reason is this idea of connecting and staying in touch with her audience because she very rarely markets to them, but she wants to stay in contact and stay top of mind. So her newsletter is just adding one really juicy piece of content that's really valuable in her topic area, which is about how to really rock it on stage and in presentations and in life.
Yeah, I love that. I remember that, especially leading up to the release of her book, definitely reading Victoria's one. I wanted to mention Fiona Keary, who we've mentioned here on the show before, and hers is a newsletter that I get every week. And it has, couple of purposes, but one of the things that Fiona does is a retail review. And so she reviews a fashion label and she draws your attention to a label. She knows so many labels. I'm like hopeless. Yeah, but she's introduced me to so many fashion labels. So I know I'm always going to get introduced to a fashion label. And not only that, but she's going to tell me, is it for my style personality or another, or my color palette? And does it come, do they cater to my size or do they specialize in petite women or very curvy women, etc.? And, where would I wear that? Is it for casual? Is it for bar wear? Is it for corporate wear, etc.? And so I know that I'm going to get that every time. But one of the reasons this newsletter goes out is that it links people back to Fiona's group. Now, Fiona's group, which is 35 plus where to shop, is where you get to know, love, and experience Fiona and her brilliance and the brilliance of her team and be part of this incredible community. But predictably, she will show up and I'll always learn something new about a new retail brand. And I'll also be directed to something fun that's happening inside the group. And another person, and Michelle, we might expect copywriters to have great newsletters, we would hope, right? And that is certainly the case for Belinda Weaver, who is one of our members and who we've mentioned again here on the show before, who has a newsletter called For the Love of Copywriting. And every single time she gives copywriting tips. So she's demonstrating that she can help you by actually helping you by providing copywriting tips. But she also very cleverly answers questions that are answered inside of her community. So she gives me, the reader, who perhaps I'm not inside of her private community, answers to the questions her member asked. So I get to see her brilliance as she answers those questions that I probably also have. Now I want to be on the inside. So this is where Michelle said earlier, being strategic. I'm giving you copywriting tips and she's very generous and she doesn't hold back or make me go anywhere. She gives me the tips right there in the newsletter. But then she lets me have a little peek inside the window of being part of her community. And it's just very, very clever. Another copywriter who I adore is Anne Handley. And she has a newsletter called Anarchy, which is very fun play on words. And she has a fortnightly newsletter. She's grown the newsletter 2,000% in the last 3 years by doing things, and these are her words, saying things like creating what you wish existed. And she said, I love this, Michelle. She said one of the ways that she gauges the effectiveness of her newsletter is how many people write back. And so right now she has about 100 people who write to her every time she sends a newsletter. And I thought, that is really cool. Isn't that a great metric? Right. So she knows, is that going up or down in accordance with the percentage of people that is, because her list is growing all the time. But I thought that's really cool. That really sparked to me. It's like, how do you get, because there's two things happening, and I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but the moment someone writes back to us because they read our newsletter, one, it's really great for our email service provider to see that people are engaging with our newsletter. But two, how much more engaged is that client if they actually bother to hit reply and say something, whether it's saying, I really love that newsletter, or, I do have a question about subject headlines, or, whatever the area is that Anne might have written about. So, but it's a consistent dive into the world of copywriting, but very much within Anne's personality and Anne's humor. And so the point we're talking about here is trying to do too many things. Again, very single-minded. She's only trying to do a couple of things. She's trying to educate and she's trying to get you to engage. I love it. So that's Anarchy. And again, we'll put links to these newsletters inside of our show notes. We'll give you the link a little later on. And while we're talking about Anne, she has created a newsletter resource called How to Newsletter. It's a free resource. You don't need to opt in or give her your details or anything like that. And that is actually one of her tips inside of that resource, is you don't always want to have locked content when you're really trying to get people to know you. And so we're going to put you a link to that in our show notes as well. All right. Anything you want to say before I move on, Michelle?
Oh, just the whole idea of writing a newsletter is so good that people want to write back to you. And I had another client who, if they were ever even just a few minutes late with their newsletter, people would write and say, hey, did I miss out? Like, what's happened?
That's great.
You still got my email address? And I think that is, that's kind of gets back to what we were saying before about, you need to write a really valuable newsletter. You need to be creating something that your audience wants to open, not just once, but every single time they see that they've got that newsletter for you. Like, I get a little shot of dopamine when I see Dave Pell's email newsletter in my inbox. It's like, oh, goody, I want to click on that. I don't feel like that about the majority of the newsletters or the other emails that I get. So how can you be that little ray of sunshine in somebody's inbox?
I love that. And the mistake number 3 is about unpredictable versus predictable newsletters. But the reason that it is related to what you just said is that this is an email that when it comes into my inbox, I'm like, oh, stop and read, right? No matter what I'm doing. And that, isn't that cool to be that in someone's inbox when most of what we get in our inbox, I know for me, is delete. And so the mistake, just to highlight it, is unpredictable versus predictable content in your newsletter. And someone who is very predictable about the content in his newsletter is James Clear, who's the author of an incredible book called Atomic Habits. It's a book that we featured here inside of our network. We sent a copy to every single member. Really, really good. But it has a predictable format. So every week in his newsletter, which is text-based, there's no images, often there's no links, is 3 things. 3 ideas from me, and he shares with you 3 ideas from him. And he's an expert in the area of productivity and habits. 2 quotes from others. So 2 clever things other people have said, and 1 question for you. And that's it. That is the whole newsletter. But it's always thoughtful. It's always, you would pay for this newsletter because the 3 ideas from him are always very juicy. And if you're interested in human potential and habits and improved performance, then you're going to want to get onto his newsletter list. And the only thing he ever mentions and puts a link to is, hey, if you haven't already got a copy of my book, Atomic Habits, here's a link. He's not trying to sell 10,000 things, and he doesn't even do it in a way that's really salesy. But for me, those ideas from him, those quotes from others, that question for you, they often become the source of content for me to share with my members, because he gets me thinking. And so, and because I know, I don't think, oh, I'm going to open up an email from James Clear and suddenly it's going to look like a magazine and there's going to be 10,000 different promotions. No, it's predictable. Every single week it's these 3 fantastic ideas, these 2 inspiring quotes, and a question that's going to get me thinking.
And how much easier is it to make that newsletter as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you're doing. Well, firstly, he's kept it simple. So, he's not saying here's 40,000 ideas from me. There's 3 ideas from me, and they are deep and thoughtful. And I'm sure they aren't just rattled off. But he knows the game he's playing. He knows what he's doing every single week. And as he thinks of ideas, he knows, oh, well, that would be great for the newsletter. Or as he sees a quote, he can think, oh, that'll be great for my newsletter. And so it just is content that naturally creates itself as you're just going about living life, because you have somewhere for that content to go as it hits you, as you see it.
And I
so
think
I love
what's
that.
important is, Michelle, we often see members, they get stuck like, oh, I haven't released an issue of my newsletter for months, because they make it so hard. And like you said, he's made it so predictable, so simple that it kind of creates itself.
Yeah, and you do that as well. You've got, certain sections of your newsletter that are always the same, even though the newsletter is always different and always interesting because of the content that goes into those sections. But you've got things that you say every time you put out a newsletter.
Right. Like there's always an editorial, there's always upcoming events, there's always, whatever the latest podcast episode, there's the member-to-member offers, there's always a featured member. And having structure like that makes it so much easier for us to publish, because throughout the week I see something and I think, oh yeah, that'll be a good lead story, or that'll be a good, and also, because I don't create the newsletter by myself, someone can go in and they can go into our members group and say, okay, what are the offers that members are offering other members at the moment, or who just had a really big win? They were a finalist for an award, or they did their first Facebook Live, or whatever the win was, and they can very quickly collate, because they're not saying, oh, what on earth are we going to put in our newsletter this week? We know we need a half dozen of this and 3 of that and 1 of that. And so it just makes that creation process a number of hours. I'm not saying it doesn't take any time, it does, but we know what we're looking for. So we're not creating from scratch every single time.
Yeah, that blank page is just a killer. So don't give yourself a blank page. Give yourself little sections that you just have to fill in the blanks for. And this one is kind of, it is sort of a quasi newsletter in that it is a regular piece of content that goes out every week. But it's a video. It's not an email newsletter. And this is by Jeff Walker, the author of the book Launch. And every Sunday night, he makes this gem of insight in a video. And each video always comes out every Sunday night. It's usually a similar duration. And this is his way of giving back to his community on a regular basis, publishing that one piece of juicy content that's just a value add. He has a space beneath for people to add comments, and they write an email every week to say, hey, here's the newsletter, here's the video, the Sunday night video. And they're usually quite curiosity based. So you don't know what the whole thing is. You've got to click through to watch the video. And that has been he's been doing it for a number of years now. And I know from some things that he was saying recently, that has really been a huge factor in his list staying engaged and interested. And so it gets back to what we were saying before. Even though the newsletter, that regular piece of content, may not be the place where you make the sale, it's tilling the soil. It's fertilizing the ground so that when you do come out with your offer, people are so ready because they appreciate the value that you're giving them. And we've got someone in our mastermind who's also using that Sunday night time frame, and that's Yvonne Shepherd from Women's Fitness Adventures. And she puts her messaging out on a Sunday night, and she just knows that's when her people they're kind of getting ready for the week. They're tuning in and looking at their screens. And she's also a really good example of a consistent newsletter that's always adding value, that's always getting great open rates. And that's Yvonne from Women's Fitness Adventures. So if you're looking for great newsletters to subscribe to, I highly recommend that one. Now here's mistake number 4, Suzi, and this one is kind of like the others, but not quite. And we want to sort of point out something very specific. And it follows on kind of neatly from the Jeff Walker example, where he's really only sharing one kind of insight, one core idea. And the mistake number 4 is thinking that your newsletter always has to be a smorgasbord versus a single topic. So you don't even have to have a lot of stories. It doesn't have to, even though Suzi's been single-minded about her newsletter, there's lots of things in that newsletter, but you could consider just putting out a newsletter with one single topic in it, one thing that you share on a regular basis. And that can be simple to create, very powerful because people know exactly what to expect. And they also know it's going to be easy to consume.
I liked this idea. Seth Godin, the wonderful marketer who we've spoken about many, many times here, he has a single topic newsletter that he sends once a week. And sometimes it's like one paragraph, sometimes it's 3 paragraphs, but it's never very, very long. But it's one, again, very thoughtful idea or concept. He almost never asks you to link to anywhere or download anything. It's just one stream of consciousness kind of idea. And I am more likely to read that, especially if it's conversational. So while our newsletter is very much that smorgasbord and it has its purpose, there are times where, especially to our non-members, where we are building relationship, where our weekly newsletter is actually a one topic. Now, we used to have a multi-topic newsletter, like a smorgasbord that we used to send to our non-members, so people who had never bought from us. But we don't do that anymore. We have a single topic every week. Now, it's not as consistent as our member newsletter, but I would say out of 52 weeks, 48 of those, our non-members will get a single topic newsletter. But there's a couple of times where we will go smorgasbord. So the first email that our non-members will get in the new year is going to be a best of the previous year. And that's going to be a newsletter that talks about our top 5 podcasts, webinars, our top 5 downloads, the top 5 events. It's going to have a little video. It's going to have pictures of our members, etc. But it's done very, very strategically, because for us to do a smorgasbord email to our non-members just doesn't serve us. It's not strategic enough for us. But when we do that strategically a couple of times a year, it's designed to showcase, hey, here's what's going on inside of our community. And this is what just happened last year. And we've got so many good plans for the new year. We would love it if you wanted to be a part of this. Simply go over here and put your name on the wait list to get an invitation the next time we open the doors to our membership, because the doors are closed for, 50 of the 52 weeks a year. And so if you want to be first in line to know when we're opening, then this is what you can expect. It's going on the inside. And so it's done very strategically. Alrighty. We've given you 4 mistakes, and they're all kind of more around the concept and what your newsletter might want to be about. But we want to talk a little more detailed right now about design mistakes, because we see these consistently. They're a bit of a bugaboo of mine. And so the last few mistakes for email newsletters that we're going to give you are going to be around how to lay out your newsletter and some other considerations you might want to make in terms of how your newsletter actually looks when it arrives in people's inboxes. So this is going to be mistake number 5, and that is making the reader have to think too hard. So making the reader have to think too hard versus having something that is scannable, which means I don't have a lot of time. I'm in the queue. I'm looking at your newsletter, and just by sort of picking up all the headline right at the top of the newsletter, or the subheadings throughout, I can get a sense of what do I want to dive into. Oh, do I want to bookmark that article because I want to read it later? Or do I definitely want to sign up for that free webinar right? But sometimes we just make it way, way too hard. And so I'm going to go back to a couple of people I mentioned earlier, Belinda Weaver and Anne Hanley, who are both copywriters, who, again, I suggest that you sign up to their newsletters just so you can see how scannable their newsletters are. You can get the gist of the newsletter very, very quickly by looking at the subheadings. And also James Clear, who we talked about earlier, who had the very simple text-only email, very, very scannable. 3 things I'm thinking, 2 quotes from others, 1 question from you. And there's a couple of other examples, but you'll just start to notice it. Which newsletters are easy for you to scan and therefore you're more likely to read them, and which I just bamboozle you, like I do not know where to look or where to go.
And as you're doing that, as you're looking at perhaps your own newsletter or others that are coming into your inbox, think about this idea of visual hierarchy. And what the heck does that mean? Well, a hierarchy is just that there's like something at the top that's the biggest, and then there's sort of the next level down and the next level down and the next level down. And all communication needs to have this hierarchy, because it's like when you land on a page and there's a big headline at the top, it's saying, hey, read me first. And then there's like a little subheadline, and then there might be an arrow pointing to a button, and it's kind of guiding your attention through the page. Well, your newsletter is just the same. So that scannability that Suzi was talking about, somebody might just be able to scan the big headline, then maybe the topics, if you've got your newsletter does divided into particular topic areas or section areas. Like Suzi's got the member updates section. So if I know that's my favorite part of Suzi's newsletter, I might skip the rest and go straight to member updates. And you want those things to be very clear. So think about, what is my visual hierarchy? Do I have one? And is it clear to my reader that this is what I'm going to read first? And then here are the next level of information? Because something happens when you tune into visual hierarchy, you realize, oh, look, these three things are actually all the same. They're all subheadings, but I'm using a different color, a different font size for all three of them. I'm not making it easy for my audience to see these three are all the same thing. They're all at the same level in the hierarchy. So think about that. And even little things that seem small in the hierarchy, like captions on photographs, are actually quite important. They're some of the most read content on a page. And if you have a visual newsletter, they're also some of the most read things in a visual newsletter. So make sure you're really thinking about that hierarchy. Now we're getting close. We're on mistake number 6. And again, we've kind of headed into the design mistakes section of today's show. So the first one was making the reader think too hard versus making the content scannable from a design perspective. That was mistake number 5. Mistake number 6 is not considering how your content is going to look on a mobile device. Now, this is, again, one of those things that even if you've got a newsletter or you don't, this is a really important universal tip for everybody. Because if you're not thinking about how your content looks on a smaller device, like the way the headlines are wrapping or the way images may be treated, that visual hierarchy we were just talking about, it all just might look like a big scrambled mess, or people are having to scroll to the right to read versus things being nice and easy for them to just flick through. Because these days you really want to be designing absolutely everything for mobile first. You want to think about your websites, your landing pages, your sales pages, your newsletters, all with this idea of mobile first. Now, if you're doing all of this yourself, you may even want to get somebody to come in and help you just to do a bit of an audit and maybe set you up with some templates that are really going to work. And right now we're at parity in terms of the traffic to the world's websites, and that's our sales pages, our shopping carts. It's almost half and half from mobiles and desktops, and it's growing in favor of mobiles. So our audiences are starting to use desktops less and less to shop and to read content and to consume the stuff we're producing online. And they're more and more and more and more using mobiles. So if your audience is skewing younger, like you're after millennials, for example, that mix is even higher right now. Most of those people are viewing content on a mobile versus a desktop. So really, all of that to say, this shift towards mobile is only going to continue, and you want to absolutely think about, does my design work on mobile first?
And when you think mobile, don't just think mobile phone. Think about tablets as well. I know for me, Michelle, I consume a lot on my iPad, because when I'm consuming, checking newsletters and things like that, I'll often be at the counter in my kitchen looking at my iPad. I'm not on my desktop, and I'm not going to look at it on my phone because it's too small and I have to put my glasses on and blah, blah, blah. So mobile, it means more than just your mobile phone. So you want to always, whether it's a landing page, like you said, or a newsletter or a website, look at it in a number of different devices so you can see, things splitting up okay. And some of the landing page templates allow you to have one view for mobile and one view for desktop. So there is some flexibility. The 7th and final mistake we have here is something that I comment on to people almost weekly. And that is something that I just see happening time and time again in people's newsletters. And that is, you put a big whopping header at the top of your email. And it's often got either the name of the newsletter or it's got your logo. And what happens is, firstly, people do not care about your brand. They do not care. You want just enough for them to recognize, oh, this is from you. But you don't want to have the top part of your screen or their inbox taken up with your logo or the name of your newsletter or the name of your store. Now, this applies not just to newsletters, but even your marketing emails. And so that space at the top, that's where you're going to get them with the big hook. What's in here? What's in it for her, for me or her or him or whoever's reading? And it's just wasted space. And sometimes I've seen these when, especially on mobile, the whole screen, my whole phone is your logo. And that doesn't mean anything to me. And so when people have to scroll, that's another way that we're making people work too hard. Where people have to scroll to see the value, one, it's a lot of work for them. Two, you're missing the opportunity to get people reading because likely people will not bother. So if you're going to put something at the top of your newsletter or your emails, then you want to keep it low profile. And by that, I mean it's vertically low. And check it on mobile because you'll see it might look okay on your desktop where you've created the newsletter, but the moment you go to mobile view, the whole screen is taken up with your logo. And so you want to use that top part to get the juicy, like what's the juiciest thing that you can give them? What is the hook? Is it the top story in the newsletter? Is it the thing that's going to have them say, oh, tell me more about that? And so you want to make that. Now, if you do want to use an image at the top, and so in our member newsletter, firstly, people know that the member newsletter, they know kind of what it contains. They get very used to that. But even though we have a header, we'll put a headline on the header image just so they know at the top, oh, okay, so the top story is about the fact, that we're going to the Reach Retreat in Hawaii, or that, we have a brand new event, or whatever it is right there at the top. So don't use all the space on your header. And this is one that, again, if you're a member of the Her Business Network and I get your newsletter and it's got a big fat header, you can expect an email from me. They are our top 7 mistakes, Michelle.
There's some good ones in there.
There are. The first, I'm going to go over them very, very quickly. So the first is using the newsletter as the primary place to sell whatever it is that you're offering. And what we're suggesting is that it complements and supplements any direct emails and direct promotions that you're doing for that thing that you really want to sell. The second mistake is trying to do too many things versus being very single-minded. The third mistake we see is having unpredictable content in your newsletter versus something that people know and like and trust you for that is predictable. The fourth was thinking that a newsletter has to be a smorgasbord when actually it can just be a single topic newsletter. The fifth one is making the reader have to think too hard versus making it scannable, using that visual hierarchy, using a headline and subheadings and consistency in your colors and in the way you lay it out, so that makes it really easy for me to consume. Number 6 was not considering mobile and how that content wraps when people are reading it on their phone or their other mobile devices. And number 7, which was a very sort of tin tacks tactical one, is about having the big header that takes way too much vertical space. So we'd love to know that these have been useful for you. And that perhaps even if you've been thinking, I must get back to doing a newsletter, I have a goal in 2022 to get back to doing a newsletter, hopefully this is going to get you on the right foot on what to consider. Now, we would love to know how you go. We would love to hear from you. So in a moment, I'm going to tell you where you can find us online, and that's a place where you can connect with me and Michelle, and you can also ask us questions. But before we do that, I would love to ask you, if you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the Her Business podcast, would you go ahead and leave us a rating or review? It's really important to us getting the word out to as many people as possible. Because when people go into Apple Podcasts and they're thinking, I want a marketing podcast, then we're going to pop up. They're going to see your great review and they become a fellow listener. So one of our gorgeous listeners is a member of the Her Business Network. Her name is Chandra Moran. And she has a business called the Transit Lounge, and she helps women who are moving from corporate to being their own boss. She helps them make that transition and replace their corporate salary with earnings from their own business. So she said this. She posted this actually in our members group. So this one wasn't on Apple Podcasts. She said, seriously, how amazing is the content and back catalogue of episodes of the Content Sells podcast? ! And I replied to say, Chandra Moran, it is seriously good. 170 plus episodes and going strong. And she said, all killer, no filler, with an applause and smiley. So thank you so much, Chandra. Thank you for listening. And yeah, if you've just joined us and this is the first episode you're listening to, we have 176 others that you might also enjoy.
Is that our new tagline? All killer, no filler.
No filler. Yeah. When I hear those words, and I know Chandra's voice does not sound anything like this, but it makes me think of a fight, like a wrestling match. All killer, no filler.
Yeah, isn't there the killer from Manila or something like that? Not that I know anything about that.
Was that a boxer? I don't know. Let's not start.
All I know is The Rock. He's so fabulous.
All I love is The Rock.
Fabulous.
All right. We've mentioned several resources and episodes on today's episode, and we want to make it really easy for you to find those goodies. So anything we've mentioned here today, you can get more information of over on our show notes, which we like to put on our website. So you're going to find them at herbusiness.com/newsletter mistakes. herbusiness.com/newsletter mistakes. That is today's episode. Michelle, what have we got coming up in the next?
Well, imagine being able to pay for all the paid traffic you want. Imagine having a way to immediately make back the cost of acquiring a lead by selling something low cost to them right away. This is what's known as a self-liquidating offer. And we've got a very special guest coming on to share how she's been doing this and how it works, what to do, how you might go about having your own self-liquidating offer.
That special guest is coming up with us 2 weeks from now. So if you don't already subscribe to the show, you want to hit that subscribe button. That way that episode will drop right into your feed right when that comes out. So that's all about self-liquidating offers, and that's coming up real soon. Until then, thank you so much for listening. Michelle, what would you like to say before we go?
Just to check out the newsletter examples that we've mentioned today. There's some really good ones there, and it just helps, I think, to see those examples. So we'll have those in the show notes for you. So definitely go and check out those newsletters.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much again for listening. We'll see you next time right here on the Content Sales Podcast. Bye for now.